Hermitcraft Season 9 has just started, and Grian has already started building a very interesting looking shop. He's mentioned that this builder's going to have a heart and even some lungs, which I think will look really interesting on a small scale. But what if it was built on a mega scale? In this video, I challenged myself to build the entity in its current state as though it was a mega base. Let's see what I came up with. Usually on a project like this, I do loads of planning, but this time I gave myself the extra challenge of doing as little as possible. So, here's my plan. After quickly deleting that, I decided it's time to move on and start building an outline of our rock in-game. Precious blocks are really good to use for this sort of thing. Because of their hard outline, it makes it very easy when trying to count out how many blocks there are in an area. For everything else though, they're pretty useless. So feel free to use this strategy in your own world. Especially if it's survival world, they're one of the most readily available blocks in the game. Alternatively, you could try retexturing a dirt block, but that's a little bit harder to get hold of. Moving on, after I've finished making the outline, I flesh out the entire build to get the finalised shape for our rock. Next, I add a quick gradient going from deep slate tiles all the way up to stone. And then I add some extra details such as moss and also some cracks in the side of the rock that might hint that there's more to this boulder than meets the eye. Now, this is a really lovely boulder, but after all, it is just a floating boulder, so we're gonna change that by adding some chains to it. Now, I like to think that this boulder was once lying dormant as part of the surrounding landscape, before starting to float off into the distance, before the local people decided to chain it to the cliff face so that it couldn't get any further away. And they were successful for a while. The rock stayed there for quite a few years, but now one of the chains is broken, and it's starting to float away again. For the structure of the chains, I very simply use crosses of polished deep slate on each layer and then join them up with deep slate walls to give it a nice, coherent chain structure. This design works a lot better than lots of the others that I tried because it allows the chains to curve in a more fluid manner and be less rigid. It's time to move on to Grian's most recent addition to the entity, which is a big tree which is made out of each different log type and lots of different leaves. I give the tree a central trunk, which all of the others are going to be twisted around, because this one's going to be the tallest, because it's going to be the spruce tree. Then I set it all to wood and use a world edit brush to add some leaves before adding some finishing details. I'm actually a big fan of this tree, although it does look a little bit strange because it's like a spruce tree plonked on top of an amalgamation of all of the other trees. Now it's time to go inside the entity, and as Grian said, this thing is not just a boulder, it is alive. On Hermitcraft, the entity's heart is a conduit, but I decide to give it a real heart. And of course, I've got to keep this as accurate as possible, so I add in all of the veins that would be needed for an actual heart and lungs to function. So of course we have the left side of the heart and the right side of the heart, and you can tell these apart by the fact that the left side is considerably bigger, and also on the left in this footage. So the blood vessels coming out of the heart that you can see are the aorta, which carries blood from the heart to the rest of the body, which is the reason that the left side of the heart is so much bigger, because it has to pump the blood a lot further. We also have the vena cava, which takes in all of the blood that has circulated around the body to be pumped to the lungs from the heart. Speaking of being pumped to the lungs, this is what the pulmonary artery and the pulmonary veins are for, taking blood to and from the lungs. So we're going to be extending these veins out to go to the lungs later on. And the final blood vessel we can see here are the coronary arteries, which supply blood to the heart and keep it alive. Well, that's the end of today's unexpected biology lesson. Let's get back to the final thing that we need to do for this project. And that is, of course, making the lungs. I decide to make a ribcage to be able to tie the lungs to make them look a little bit less hangy like the heart is. After I've built the ribcage, I create the lungs and then tie them to the ribcage using the pulmonary artery and the pulmonary vein. There's only one thing left to do, and that's colouring the entire build, and we are done. Let's go and have a look at the finished thing. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please remember to like and subscribe and even hit the notification bell. And I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.